live, work and play. We pay our respects to the Darkinjung country and to elders past and present. We recognise the continued connection to these lands and waterways and extend this acknowledgement to the homelands and stories of those who also call this place home. We recognise our future leaders and the shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and our people. A reminder to everyone participating that this meeting is being recorded and webcast as required by the operational procedures for local planning panels, and there is to be no other recording or filming of this meeting. Following this meeting, the panel will meet separately to confer and discuss each of the items on this agenda and to formulate decisions. The panel's decisions from the meeting and the audio recording should be available on the website of the Council, ordinarily within about 7 days of this meeting. I'd ask you to keep your electronic devices on silent and turn your microphone to mute until it is your turn to speak. After you've spoken, please also remember to put your microphone back on mute. I remind my panel members that you are required to have your camera on for the duration of the meeting. For other attendees, you do not need to have your camera on, but when you do come to speak, please turn your camera on and ensure that you introduce yourself so the panel is aware of who's speaking at any given time. We also ask if you could refrain from entering comments in the chat box in relation to the matters before the panel. The chat box may be used to advise the Secretariat of any technical issues or other minor matters. Any comments made in the chat box in relation to the application will be deleted and not considered. Let me introduce the panel members for this meeting. I am the new chair of the Central Coast panel. My name's Terry Sheehan and I'm a retired judge of the Land and Environment Court. I have two expert professional panel members, Mr. Greg Woodhams and Mr. David Furlong, and we're pleased to have a nominated community panel member, Mr. Jerome Favand. Are there any apologies? I don't think so. The following development application that meets the State Government's public meeting criteria will be considered today. DA/3623/2022, 37 Wards Hill Road, Kilcare Heights, concerns the proposed telecommunications facility. The panel's been provided with assessment reports prepared by council staff. We've undertaken a site orientation and council staff have also briefed the panel on key issues raised in the application. I remind everyone that the panel has also been furnished with all the documentation provided by the applicant, as well as public submissions received in relation to the application, and there's no need for any of these to be read. Today we have the following people registered to address the panel: Bruce Gregory, Howard Game, Gay Follington, Michael Corbett, Michael Allsop, Ross Stiles, Catherine Cotterill, Jodie Deemer, D-E-A-M-E-R, Alan Backhouse, Rodney Dawson and Jordan Leverington, and I will propose to call the people in that order when the time comes. I welcome you all. This meeting is an opportunity for the panel to hear from members of the community and the applicant, and for the panel to ask questions, if necessary, to clarify its understanding. It's not a forum for a debate, but rather to ensure the panel is in receipt of all the various views and information in order to make an informed decision. We'll hear from the speakers on the item, and we'll then hear from the applicant's representative and so on. Prior to commencing your address, please state your name and the organisation, group or party that you may represent. All speakers would know from the registration form that our practice is to allow individual members of the public 3 minutes to speak on the matter. Panel members may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of the issues involved in the submission, or to clarify a particular point. Speakers are not entitled to ask questions of the panel or of council officers. Once members of the public have spoken, the applicant's representatives will be given a total maximum speaking time of 15 minutes to respond. Today that's Mr. Leverington, should he wish to do so. Again, the panel may have questions for the applicant or the applicant's representative or request some clarification. I remind everyone that each speaker is to be heard in silence while they're addressing the panel, and the courtesy and respect to be observed throughout this meeting. Importantly, there's to be no personal criticism directed at council staff, other speakers, the panel, or people who aren't here. Please do not try to denigrate others in order to make your point. This does nothing to advance the panel's understanding of the matters under consideration and may only serve to undermine any useful points that you make. Please be aware that this is a public meeting and is also being recorded and published, and you are responsible for your own comments, so do try to avoid making slanderous remarks. At the conclusion of your address to the panel and following any questions, the speaker will be asked to mute the microphone and leave the meeting, or stay until the end of the meeting if they wish. Once we have heard from all the speakers, we'll close this meeting and move on to our deliberation meeting. As previously mentioned, the recording of the panel meeting and the decision of the panel on each item will be made public in the coming days, usually well within a week of the meeting. Any decision of the panel will be accompanied by its reasons. Decisions will be made by the panel by majority vote, but the chair does have a casting vote if needed. Applications will either be approved, refused or deferred. It is possible the panel may make a different decision than recommended by council staff. If a matter is deferred, it is also possible the panel may subsequently determine the application by electronic means without another public meeting. After hearing from speakers, the panel may ask questions of council officers to clarify matters raised. The first item on our agenda is the declaration of any interests. Panel members are required in the Code of Conduct to make a declaration of conflict of interest. It's a requirement of the meeting practice that panel members complete a conflict of interest declaration for items on the agenda. I've completed mine. Does any member of the panel have a declaration of interest which has not previously been made? I have none.
I have none.
Thank you, David.
None.
None?
None from me.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting of the panel. The panel met on 22 August 2024, differently constituted from today. And I just ask if everybody is happy, if all the members of the panel are happy for the minutes to be noted.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Greg? Yes. Thank you, Jerome. Very well. Turn therefore to the development application that I mentioned. And there's no need for the council officers to introduce their material, but I'll now call the speakers in the order that I mentioned, if everybody's comfortable. First speaker is Mr. Gregory, Bruce Gregory. Yes, Mr. Gregory. I can't see you or hear you. Mr. Gregory present? If not, we'll move on to the second listed speaker, Mr. Howard Game. I see
Gregory is there. He's just not, he hasn't come off mute. He's on a telephone call.
Okay.
We're just trying to unmute him. 1 moment.
Okay, thank you.
No, it doesn't look like we're able to contact him, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, Mr. Game, we turn to you.
Thank you, Chair. Could you see and hear me?
I can, sort of.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you. Everybody right? All the panel members right? I've got you now, Mr. Game. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
So my name is Howard Game. I'm Optus's National Site Acquisition and Inventory Manager, focusing primarily on the mobile network. And I thank the committee for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. Look, we are extraordinarily disappointed by the recommendation of Councillor Flanders. We consider that all the relevant information has been provided to Council and sometimes on a number of occasions the information has been requested and supplied on separate occasions. Jordan Levington, who's listed to speak, is Optus's, ours consultant town planner that's been handling this matter. He will take the committee through the detail of the reasons why we consider the the current planning report is flawed, and arguing why we consider that we have provided all the relevant information and demonstrated that the proposal is environmentally acceptable. I don't plan to repeat those submissions. Rather, what I wanted to do was ask the committee to focus on a number of key points. Firstly, a DA for essentially the same application was approved by a previous local planning panel in November 2021. It is true that that application was overturned in the Land and Environment Court, but not on any merits or environmental considerations. It was on the basis of a failure of some technical compliance process grounds. It doesn't alter the merits or otherwise of the application in our view. Secondly, there's absolutely no doubt that this facility is needed. Mobile coverage in the area is very poor to non-existent, and it's fair to say that for the majority of the community, mobile coverage is considered an essential service, as important as electricity as water supply. The fact that there's federal government black spot funding to help facilitate this development demonstrates the importance of the site and the level of interest from the community. It's a facility that will provide service for all three carriers that build and operate mobile networks in Australia. There are a whole range of people that provide mobile services, but they are either one of the three main carriers, Optus, TPG and Telstra, or they resell on those networks. And this facility will facilitate all facilities, and it's all on the one structure. It's also fair to say that providing mobile service in a locality like Kilcare is a significant challenge. A mobile network is fundamentally a two-way radio service. Radio requires line of sight. It suffers from interference, etc. Kilcare, as I'm sure the committee is aware, the panel is aware, is extraordinarily difficult terrain and lots of vegetation. Vegetation can block the signals. I'd also note that I've spent the last 32 years working for Optus, building the mobile network, and by profession I'm a planner and practiced as a planner for quite a number of years before joining Optus. And in my personal professional opinion, the site that we're proposing is a good site that strikes the appropriate balance between all the relevant environmental planning and visual impact considerations and the fundamental need and community expectation for an effective and efficient mobile network and mobile service. I would also note that the council has been assessing this DA for approaching 2 years. In that period, we've responded to 9 RFIs. As I mentioned, on occasion answering the same questions. We understand that council needs all the information to enable it to assess an application, but it surprises us and disappoints us that information requests continue to come. Oh, now we've got X, we'd like Y as well. And that's again one of the key reasons why we think the recommendation is flawed. We believe over that period of time we have provided all that information, and to the extent we haven't, that could be easily answered by way of a conversation. And in that regard, I would highlight to the panel that in the more recent past, we've sought to meet with council officers to discuss the concerns, to talk them through the issues that they've raised and explain why we believe we've answered the questions, and or provided the information, and to the extent there are further questions, answer them. But we've been unsuccessful in being able to meet as requested. Overall, given the importance and undoubted community benefit this facility provide, we Optus would ask that the committee defer the matter and instruct council planners to meet with us so that we can talk through the issues, we can demonstrate the information that we have provided that answers the questions, and to the extent there are further questions, we can answer them so that they can properly assess the application and put it back before the committee. Sorry, the panel. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Gay. The next speaker on the list is Gay Follington.
Terry, do you want me to let you know when 3 minutes has passed?
Well, that'd be helpful, but I didn't want to shut that down.
Sure.
Bruce Gregory, the first speaker, has just been able to dial back in. Would you like me to let him in? Hello.
I'm here, but I'm not going well.
Okay, Terry,
got-
the first speaker, Bruce Gregory, against the item, he's been able to come back in and fix his microphone issues. Would you like me to
Is he
let him in?
available now?
He is available now.
Yes, we will. Yes, please.
Okay,
Mr. Gregory.
thank you. Hi, Bruce. You've been let in. Oh, hang on, it's still coming in. Hi, Bruce. You're now in and ready to speak.
Thanks, Mr. Gregory.
This is he.
Thank you. Speak up.
We live at Kilcare Heights on the Scenic Road, and I'm a volunteer with the Rural Fire Service, and I also run a little business in my retirement years, and we are constantly having to go out to the back fence to either make or receive calls and SMSs. And the same applies down at the fire station at Fraser Road, in the Fraser Road area. Thank you.
Is that all you wish to say, Mr.
That's enough.
Gregory? Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for your perseverance. The next
Thank you.
speaker is Gay Follington. Yes. You're on mute. You're on mute. Still on mute. You need to unmute. Your microphone is still on mute.
Unfortunately, we're unable to assist with unmuting you, Gay.
Just need,
Maybe
you
try
just
leave and come back
click on
in.
the little picture. Click on the little picture that says mic.
See the picture of the microphone?
I think she's going to come back in.
Will we move on? The next listed speaker is Michael Corbett. Mr. Corbett, are you there?
Yes, I am. Are you reading me?
I'm hearing you.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm a Kilcare resident, have been for 10 years and have endured that time in a mobile black hole. As I think most of us will agree, this communications tower is sorely needed and overdue, and everything possible should be done to expedite its construction. Thank you for the opportunity to let me present my point of view. It's an overdue communications facility that will provide coverage for, as I understand it, around 1,300 homes currently negatively affected in this area. Now, please bear that number in mind, 1,300, when we're taking into account the objections of a few. Lack of reliable mobile phone coverage means many homes require a landline connection for peace of mind. Now, this costs around $1,000 annually. For many, that's an unnecessary additional financial burden in these days. As it stands, we're at high risk of complete communication failure if telegraph poles collapse, cutting off these landlines, highly likely in a bushfire, and this summer is looking like a hot, dry scenario. Then there is the reliable mobile phone communications need in the event of an emergency, car accident, boating or fishing, surfing incidents, a medical issue, if someone's lost or injured in the bush, or the urgent need to call the police. Community safety and amenity are of paramount importance, yet scant reference has been made to these needs in this assessment document, 70 pages of it, and scant reference to the importance of this facility. Some of the key issues that they do touch on: visual impact. Yes, there's already an unsightly water reservoir in situ on the proposed block on Wards Hill Road. A communications tower will be unsightly, yes, maybe, but just look at the thousands of unsightly telegraph poles that festoon around us with drooping wires. We drive past every day. We don't see them anymore. You'll get used to it. It's one pole. There are 20,000 or more telecommunication poles in Australia, and dozens of those in bushland areas across the Central Coast. This is a modern day necessity needed for community safety, communication and commerce. We have one road in and out, and if we have a breakdown in communication, such as the one we had last night, during a crisis period, resulting in no connection between emergency responders and local residents or visitors, this could well be life-threatening. Whose shoulders does it then rest on? Site selection and coverage is another area they were looking at. Other sites were evaluated in 2019 and thereabouts. This site is council owned. It already contains an unattractive above ground concrete water tank of over 10 metres and an ancillary electrical building. No one complains about that because they need water when they turn on their taps.
That's time. That's
already?
3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wind up, Mr. Corbett, please.
Sorry, I missed that.
Could you wind up shortly?
Yeah,
please?
yeah, sure. Okay. Look, I think really though, the 70 pages focuses so much on flora and fauna impacts and not receiving additional information or significant information. I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Howard Game, who's saying sit down and talk about it. Have a meeting. Move this thing along. There seems to me a lot of bureaucratic pettiness and selective expertise. Talk to the specialists. Let's get this thing underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. I'm going to go back to Ms. Follington.
Yes.
You're on the air.
Thank you, Chair. I finally managed to get the microphone to work.
Good on you. Don't worry about it.
So I'm a long-term resident of Kilcare. I don't have too many problems. Unbelievably, where I live, I do not have too many problems with my phone coverage. Calls drop in and out reasonably often, but by and large, it's okay. My neighbour a few doors down has to stand in one room and juggle the phone around, and the calls are often distorted, and my neighbour a bit further down has to go out into the park to operate her business. My main concern, however, given that 70% of the area doesn't have good coverage, is the safety issues, not just for the people who live here, but for the people who visit. We have very high visitation rates. Most weekends we have people coming to bushwalk, to mountain bike, to kayak, to sail, to swim, to picnic, all of those things. And they probably don't realise that there's not very good coverage here. In the national park, there's very patchy coverage, and on the beach itself, there's patchy coverage. So that's my big concern really, is for the safety of our community. Now we know the anecdotal stories of the woman who was bitten on the hand by a funnel web, could only get 1 bar signal a few doors down, heart attack, glass cutting, falling on glass, you know, those sorts of things. So they're all issues and they're reasonably well documented. But with the high visitation rates that we have, on the beach, we're lucky, we've got a fantastic surf club. They're operational for several months. Off season, there's no one there, and the beach has patchy coverage. I swim at Putty Beach, which is right up the end of Kilcare Beach, because that's a lot safer. And we have a lot of big family groups that travel from Western Sydney, because it's easy drive, easy parking, don't have to pay much. They come, they have lovely picnics, barbecues, and I see the kids running into the water. I see the fishermen going around the rocks, and often these groups are big migrant groups. We don't know how well they can swim, and I have concerns about that because I know that down the beach on that end it's patchy coverage. Round the rocks it could be patchy coverage, up in the park patchy coverage. So they're my big concerns for the people here, but for the people who come.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much. I'm glad you persevered with us. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Mr. Michael Allsop next. I can see you on the camera, Mr. Allsop. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, panel members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm the president of the Wagstaff to Kilcare Community Association. I'd like to reinforce that my comments today are shared strongly with other local groups that we're closely associated with and more broadly across the community. We've been advocating for over 10 years for improvement to mobile services in the area, and it's even recorded in Hansard in 2016 in relation to black spot funding. There's no need to state again why reliable mobile service is important, but you've heard that the majority of properties in this area either have no coverage or coverage outdoors only and whatever. Our bushland and beach coverage is minimal and unsafe for the users. Yet the assessment that we've just looked at pays lip service to any of this in favour of what you might call spurious objections relating to the site. There are over 24,000 of these facilities in Australia, and there's nothing unknown about them. Their performance or their environmental impact on people, flora or fauna. And there are dozens of them, as you know, in bushland and suburban areas across the Central Coast as well. Now, this particular proposal is for a slim tower on low profile antennas on a 35 square metre site with a 20 square metre equipment enclosure nearby. And all of that is on disturbed ground, which has been set aside for infrastructure. That's about the size of a double garage, it strikes me. And there's over 1,000 pages of detail have been provided to enable a fair assessment of this tiny site in accordance with the requirements for planning approval. The proposal also covers, I think, 400 odd square metres of existing driveways that council already use. So they're nothing new. And together they're only a very small part of the entire water tower lot, which was completely excavated years ago. So we're satisfied with the work that's been undertaken by the proponents over the last several years to investigate not only this site, but other alternatives. And we feel that they've represented the proposal in good faith, in accordance with best practice and in accordance with their experience. So in short, we believe that the proposed engineering solution is the best in our situation. The community benefit's huge. The environmental and heritage impact is minuscule. The visual impact is acceptable, and the EME considerations are trivial. We note that all external and internal assessment of the proposal has proven supportive, with the exception of that by the council ecologist. And some information that they've requested, they've said is outside their area of competence, with no recognition of the fact that it had already been addressed in prior papers. Lastly, the bald statement that the public interest cannot be demonstrated is you call it a hard slap in the face to this community, completely ignorant of its needs and its polite submissions over the last 10 years. So on those grounds, we'd recommend strongly that the panel reject the recommendation to refuse the application and to set in train a mechanism for sensible approval of the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Allsop. Thank you very much. Ross Stiles. I've got you on my screen twice, Mr. Stiles, but we'll only hear from you once, I think. You're on mute. You need to unmute.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in Greenwood in Kilcare. My father bought that block of land and built on it in 1947, and I purchased it from him in 1970, which was 54 years ago. I have a long affinity with the area, its environment and its community. I'm a retired architect. Previously, I was a director of architecture, Australia's largest design practice, and I received a postgraduate degree in environmental studies from Macquarie University. So I'm very much a recognised greenie in the environment here. At my home, I have 0 mobile coverage. I can only get reception via Wi-Fi calling through the NBN. If I walk up to the street in front of my house, I have no coverage whatsoever for walking around this block. At my home, in my street, we have regular and electricity outages. So at those times, I have no mobile coverage. Just yesterday, we once again had a power outage. At the forum for the previous DA, the community raised three main concerns. We need reliable mobile coverage to receive bushfire warnings, and as we're directly adjacent to Budai National Park. It's critical to have connectivity for medical emergencies, and we need a reliable service to undertake business effectively. My friend Tony Wright, who present, spoke at the forum for the previous DA in support of the proposal. He wanted to address this forum today, but unfortunately, he now has motor neurone disease and is unable to speak strongly enough. He and his wife have significant concerns that if he has a fall or a breathing difficulties, emergency services may not be able to be contacted. His support for the mobile tower proposal is now stronger than ever, as you'd imagine. I now have a design consultancy company and I work from home. My business is affected by a lack of reliable mobile service. Proposed mobile facility on the water tower site is the best option for the following reasons. The site is at a high point in the district and is public land. The visual impact would be minimal. I've done it myself, drive past the site in either direction and views of the site are blocked by dense high vegetation. Mobile phones and towers are safe. Just yesterday, the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Service Safety Agency released a definitive report which had been commissioned by the World Health Organization, which analysed the 5,000 most significant international scientific studies on the potential effect of mobile phones in public health, undertaken between 1994 and 22. It concluded that, quote, evidence does not show a link between mobile phones and brain cancer or any other head cancer, and that study included potential effects in mobile phone towers. So being near it, being an objectioner to this DA is not valid on that technical point. The suggestion to install a network of smaller transmitters throughout the community is not a viable solution. A large number would be required. It is evident that this type of system only works if it boxes off an existing mono tower, and without that, the service would be substandard. The plan report indicates that key services agencies such as CASA, RHS, Ausgrid don't object to the proposal. Council's own internal officers all supported the application, except for the ecologists who wanted some further information. The applicants knew that an adequate level of information has been provided. The broader community is surprised and disappointed that council planners have recommended that the application be refused. Committed environmentalists like me need to be fair and reasonable. Typically, I'd be very objecting to any compromises, but I believe that this application is the best mobile network option to serve the overall public interest. My recommendation to the panel is to reject council's recommendation and approve the application with whatever reasonable conditions of consent need to be applied to satisfy statutory requirements and ensure an acceptable community and environmental outcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Staff. Catherine Cotterill.
Catherine's unable to attend the meeting today, but she just wanted it noted that she's against.
Very well, thank you. We'll move on to Jodie Deemer.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you yet, but that's my fault, not yours.
No, I think it's my fault. I don't have access to the camera on my laptop at the moment, but we dealt with it today when we logged in, if that's all right.
Fine, please.
Okay, so thank you very much, panel. I've tried to limit my comments to 3 minutes as requested. I've been a resident of Kilcare for about 20 years and the owner of Budai Gallery, Contemporary Aboriginal Art, for over 16. Firstly, I'd like to address the impact that poor mobile reception had on my small business. Most transactions in a retail business are done through an EFTPOS machine, and approximately 30% of my transactions were done walking around outside the gallery trying to get a signal. Not only did this look unprofessional, but it left clients unattended. The sales that were lost because of this is incalculable. I also conducted general business from the gallery, speaking to clients and suppliers, for example, and these calls often take time. I conducted most of those calls standing on the street outside a local cafe for all to hear, sometimes private calls, once again leaving the gallery unattended. And I frequently needed to call my or a staff member's home to have an item delivered or picked up, but because Fraser Road and Beach Drive have no mobile reception, this was always challenging, often unachievable, leaving clients disappointed and sometimes sales unfulfilled. Moving on, my community is located in a bushfire zone with only one road in or out. Community members and visitors have no mobile reception or suffer significant black spots when on Kilcare or Putty beaches, in the national park and on the waterways. The odds of a catastrophic emergency occurring in our area is high to very high. These public safety issues should be of great concern to this panel and put above and beyond what seem now to be sticking points. Let me assure you, regardless of its visual impact, if I were able to locate the tower in my front yard in order to help the community, I would do so tomorrow. Lastly, and most importantly, last night, coincidentally, we lost power for about an hour between 7 and 8 o'clock. This frequently happens. We live on a bushy block, as many people here do, so we don't have solar panels as an alternative power source. I was home alone in the pitch black. As we have no mobile coverage at my home, we use Wi-Fi calling, but with no power, there is no Wi-Fi connection, so no mobile reception or internet, so no access to the community portals that alert and update the community in these emergencies. But here's an anomaly. How is Energy Australia able to send me a text message about the outage if I have no mobile service? How do they get through? And under all circumstances, I should always be able to call 000. In fact, that's often the only option showing on my phone, even at home with Wi-Fi calling. Last night, I tried calling 000 5 times. I have the call records to prove it, and I didn't get connected once. This situation is frustrating and dangerous. The greater community good and our safety should be the paramount consideration of this panel, and I thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Deemer. Thank you very much. Alan Blackman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me okay.
I can, perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel. I'd like to speak in support of the Council's recommendation and against the proposed tower. I'm a person who's had the enjoyment of the Boudai Peninsula for over 60 years, both as a long-term resident and a person who's spent a great deal of time enjoying the scenic values and the amenity that the area affords. And that scenic amenity is something that's recognised in the wider planning system. I think that the assessment that has been undertaken by Optus for the visual assessment is significantly lacking, and I particularly point to the issue of the existing treed skyline that forms the ridgetop of the Boudai Peninsula. When viewed from most surrounding locations, that existing view is one of trees. The proposed tower will extend something in the order of 20 metres above the tree skyline and break what is currently an undisturbed, visually pleasing skyline. Optus has failed to recognise that in their assessment, and I support the Council's assessment that the visual assessment has not been correctly done. The second point I'd like to make is regarding Optus's failure to properly consider alternative locations. There was a cursory assessment of several locations in the alternative, and in particular the existing tower on the scenic road at the top of Kilcare Heights. There's an existing tower there. It's identified as Site A in the application. It achieves 63% coverage of the local area. The proposed tower and its proposed location achieves 65%. It seems hard to justify the small difference when there's an existing tower that could be utilised. Optus, in response to the RFIs from council asking for more detailed explanation as to why the alternative sites weren't suitable, gave a cursory response that that information had already been provided. Another point I'd like to raise is the need for an asset protection zone around the tower and the associated service box. That asset protection zone needs to be 10 metres, but it's been truncated at the road boundary, and that has ignored the fact that the Rural Fire Service do require the asset protection zone to be installed in its full width, and that's been discounted for some reason in the assessment. The overall assessment by Optus, I think, has been somewhat embarrassing, if I can use that word. There's repeated requests there from council to provide information. Council staff have properly asked for information, and as Mr. Game said at the start of the meeting, their answer was, we've already provided that documentation. Well, I think the council assessment shows that they haven't. I would strongly support the panel to refuse the application in accordance with the council assessment, which has been done in a highly professional and diligent manner.
That's time.
Thank you. We certainly recognise the need for a tower and communication, but I think it's certainly in the wrong spot. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Blackman. Thank you very much. Next speaker, Mr. Rod Dawson. We should declare at the outset that Mr. Dawson and I have known each other for about 50 years. We were at the law school together. Haven't seen you for a long time, Rod, and I can't see you now, but I know you're there somewhere.
Yeah, I can see you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Well, that's good. That's good. Mr. Chairman and panel members, thank you for the opportunity. As the agenda report demonstrates, this application is deficient. It contains errors, omissions and inconsistencies, and it's so inadequate that the council expert staff have concluded, after careful examination, that it's not able to be properly assessed and have therefore recommended refusal. I support their recommendation. Save for one matter, which I'll return to, I need not repeat those deficiencies. They are all clearly identified in the report, as are the 11 reasons for refusal. So if the staff are unable to properly assess the application on its face, then it's my respectful submission that the panel can't properly assess it either. That this is so is best illustrated in a 1982 case called Parramatta City Council and Hale. I've got the references I can send through later, where the then President of the Court of Appeal, Moffat J, said, it was in relation to the football stadium in the park at Parramatta, an inference would be drawn that matters were not taken into account as a result of, quote, inadequacy of information before, unquote, the relevant decision-making body, and a failure of that body to, quote, obtain or receive matters which would inform it or better inform it, and as a result, the reasonableness of its decision. Later, the President of the Court of Appeal said, by remaining ignorant of relevant environmental matters, an authority could not avoid its obligation to consider in its ignorance and then give a valid consent. This state of affairs comes about because of the deficiencies in the application and the fact that the applicant has declined recent requests for additional information made pursuant to Regulation 36 of the 2021 regulation. It's noteworthy that the definition of additional information means information that the consent authority, in this case it would be the panel, considers necessary to properly consider the DA. The one matter which I mentioned earlier, which I would return to, relates to bushfire threat. Both the Rural Fire Service and the Bushfire Report Attachment 5 reference an APZ of 10 metres measured from any part of the proposed structure and identifies a fire threat from the west as most likely. Yet on the western side of the structures, only some 4 metres is achieved, and that's shown in Attachment 5, because at that point, the applicant shows the APZ flattened or truncated at the western boundary, because the further 6 metres required would take the APZ beyond the boundary of the site into the road reserve of Wards Hill Road and decimate the roadside birds vegetation, which is supposed to, according to the applicant, assist with the screening of the structures. This illustrates another reason why the chosen site is unsuitable. It's just too small. So in my respectful submission, to approve the DA in the face of these identified deficiencies would not only be contrary to the principles in Hale that I mentioned, but also contrary to what is known as the Wednesbury principle of unreasonableness, best described in a decision of our High Court in Citizenship versus Lee, LI, in 2013, in that such a decision would lack, quote, an evident and intelligible justification, thereby rendering it void. So I support the recommendation. I'm done. I support the recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Leverington, your opportunity to respond.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak. My name is Jordan Leverington, and I work as a planner for ServiceStream, who is acting on behalf of Optus. Before I get into the rest of my prepared presentation, I just would like to quickly draw on the points made previously. So in terms of bushfire, I wish to direct the panel's attention to the RFS's comments and council staff's report, where it says the RFS has recommended a 10-metre APZ excepting where limited by property boundaries. This is the case with respect to any APZ to the west, given the proximity of the proposed development to the boundary with the road reserve. And therefore, a condition is proposed requiring landscaping within the 10-metre APZ be managed. So it's not that it requires that it has to, like, that property boundary has limited it. In terms of the candidate A, and whilst it may have a percentage of the area which provides a greater coverage, slightly better coverage, it's not of the residents' houses or the people where they're most likely going to use it. It's over bushland and areas that aren't as useful. So we have significant objections to the planning report presented by Council and do not believe that it is a factual representation of the information provided by us in response to the 9 requests for information. In the event that Council is of a mind, in the event that the panel is of a mind to accept the staff recommendation, we request the panel defers their decision on the report presented and directs Council and Optus to meet in person to resolve the requirements of the assessment and to agree what information has been presented and conduct a fully informed review of the critical issues. We are of the firm belief that we have satisfactorily responded to the information requests over the last 2 years with this proposal and have been provided to Council for assessment. In this time, there have been 3 council planning officers managing this proposal, and we believe that this has led to the disconnect with information considered. I also note that those 3 planners that were looking after it no longer work with council. Whilst there are numerous reasons for refusal in the report council presented, these ultimately boil down to 4 issues: potential flora and fauna impacts, consideration of alternate sites, visual impact, and potential Aboriginal heritage impacts. Due to time limitation, I will address these as themes rather than individual reasons for refusal. We have provided 2 ecological reports to Council, and on both occasions it was determined that no significant habitat corridors will be impacted and no threatened flora or fauna species will be significantly impacted. The second report provided to Council in January 2024 included the 15 tests of significance for the threatened species in question. I wish to draw the panel's attention to page 230 of the agenda, which lists the tests of significance undertaken and where they can be found in the amended ecological report. It appears council staff have not considered our January 2024 documentation in full, as numerous reasons for refusal relate directly to these responses provided in that report. In relation to the reason for refusal relating to EME impacts on flora and fauna, we have provided 3 separate references to scientific reviews on the effects of radio frequency electromagnetic energy on flora and fauna to Council in January 2024. As this was not raised again in the following 5 RFIs, it was considered that this matter had been resolved. The scientific consensus of these reports was that whilst further research is recommended, there is no sound scientific evidence that the low levels of EME have an adverse impact on animals or plants. In relation to the inconsistency between tree removal and retention information, it was clearly clarified in the amended ecology report provided to Council in January 2024, and I will summarise these comments now. The flora and fauna report focused on the value of the trees, whilst the arborist report focused on the tree health, structure and botanical significance. The flora and fauna report also stated that the tree numbering captured within the arborist report should be relied upon as they have been tagged and can be re-identified. In terms of tree identification, it is very difficult to determine the exact species without their reproductive features being available for positive identification. It is noted that the majority of the trees were relatively young with a diameter of breast height between 3 and 15 centimetres. The disparity raised by Council's ecologists relating to trees described as 11 and 21 in the Ecological Australia report. This report goes on to provide a tree assessment in which both are recommended for removal. This is a black tree oak, a black she oak and a red bloodwood. Neither of these trees are endangered or by themselves provide critical habitat for endangered or protected species. The removal of these trees is considered inconsequential when recognising the retention and planting of additional trees in the immediate area. The removal of these trees is primarily based on establishing an appropriate bushfire asset protection zone. In terms of visual impact, the issues being relied upon for these reasons for refusals have not been previously raised in the 9 requests for additional information and almost 2-year assessment timeframe on this application. The visual impact assessment with photo montages and elevation drawings prepared by Urbis on our behalf were supplied to Council in 2022. It is disappointing to learn of Council's concerns regarding the qualification of the report author and is raised as a reason of refusal despite it not being raised with us previously. For the record, the author, Ashley Poon, has a Bachelor of Planning and Design Architecture degree with over 20 years experience in 3D visualization. The report was reviewed by Peter Hack, who has a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture, a Diploma of Applied Science in Amenity Horticulture, is a Registered Landscape Architect and a Fellow of the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects. The conclusion of the VIA, the Visual Impact Assessment, is that the proposal is not of a scale of visual prominence that should result in an adverse impact to the visual amenity of the area. Council staff have raised concern with the use of the guidance notes used to make an assessment of the visual impact, however have failed to recognise that in Chapter 1 of this Visual Impact Assessment, it states that there are no specific legislative requirements for the methodology of a visual assessment, and for this reason the industry typically referred to the guidance of these documents. The Council report has made much out of the comment in the VIA that suggests that consideration should be given to a monopole topped with slimmer profile head frames and antennas. In addition, that we had not provided any discussion in our SEE or changed the design. The design of the proposed monopole has been discussed in length in the SEE, the Statement of Environmental Effects, and the answer to this particular issue was also given in our response to the 9 RFI in May this year. The proposal already integrates the slimmest head frames available, and all 3 major carriers have been included. Standard telecommunications facilities generally use head frames which protrude much further from the monopole and allow a greater number of antennas to be fitted. It is an inherent requirement of that this facility be taller than its surroundings in order to operate effectively. Obstructions between the facility and the end users degrade its effectiveness and limit its reach. The design has been extensively reviewed in order to minimise its visual impact. This has been achieved by co-locating all 3 major carriers on a single pole, a slimline head frames, and reduced equipment. No further reductions in its visual mass are possible. Telecommunications facilities, like other infrastructure, is utilitarian in nature, and as such, its visual characteristics are driven by this. Like light and power poles, this infrastructure is quite visible but would not draw the attention to the casual observer in the long term. Another council issue which has only just been raised as part of the recommendation for refusal is the potential impact to human health. This is despite being provided with 2 EME reports showing that facility will operate well below the Australian standard limits set by APANSA. A second EME report was provided in May 2023 in response to council requesting that property addresses of all the points of interest be added. The statement of environmental effects submitted in November 22 also includes a detailed section explaining EME and health. I would like to highlight that the specific reason for refusal that has been made in relation to Principle 2, co-locate telecommunication facilities wherever practical, section of the New South Wales Telecommunications Facilities Guide, including broadband. This principle calls for the resultant cumulative levels of RF emissions to be within the Australian standard maximum human exposure levels. The panel's attention is drawn to the EME report, where it clearly states that the maximum cumulative EME level has been calculated at only 3.73% of the 100% public exposure limit, and that all carriers have been included in that calculation. I also wish to advise at this point that 100% public exposure limit is still considered safe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is noted that council staff have suggested that they need to engage a suitably qualified and independent expert to peer review the EME report. However, as we have requested an expedited finalisation of this assessment, this couldn't occur and therefore has become a reason for refusal. This is desperately unfair statement, given that council has been in possession of the EME report since submitting the documents on the portal almost 2 years ago. There has been ample time in which council could have sought this advice had they deemed it so critical to the assessment. In any event, we do not feel that this is required, as EME reports are prepared under the sanctioned industry standard methodology and in nationally accepted format, relied on by all councils across Australia. These methodologies are audited by ACMA and are continually found to be reliable. Site safety is always verified after construction by an independent NATA assessor who provides certificates of compliance. This would be provided for this proposal. Council, in terms of alternate sites, Council have been provided with extensive information relating to alternate sites, not only in section 4.2 of the SEE, but also in follow-up emails and responses to RFIs. We've also provided coverage plots demonstrating the potential of services from 5 potential candidates and given reasoning as to why the alternate sites are not feasible. We have also previously explained that small cells will not provide an acceptable network outcome over this large, undulating and heavily vegetated area. They also have a limited network capacity compared to a macro type base station such as what is currently proposed. I wish to highlight a recent Land and Environmental Court decision from TPG Telecom Limited at Verse Inner West Council 2023, where this decision states, and I quote, "Whilst the consideration in accordance with section 4.15 includes 2010 guidelines pursuant to the TISEP, which requires regard to matters of site selection and design, this does not mean that the proposed development and its impacts ought to be assessed against a hypothetical alternative for it to be located elsewhere, or that it's their obligation on the proponent to establish that the proposed location and design is the best outcome." End quote. It is the role of the decision authority to consider the acceptability of the proposed development in the proposed location in accordance with section 4.15 of the EPA Act and based on the information which has been provided in the application. Reasons for refusal 6C, 8B and 9C states that there's been insufficient information provided to confirm the presence of Aboriginal objects and places. In response to this, I wish to reiterate the following. Our report drafted by Kleinfelder has been criticised by staff for not being a due diligence report. However, it meets all of the requirements. A due diligence assessment must include ground disturbance evaluation, preliminary investigation, landscape feature evaluation, and a desktop analysis and site inspection. Whilst not titled as such, our report is for all intents and purposes a due diligence assessment. The report has also dispelled the cultural heritage significance assertions of the site outlined in a due diligence report written for an adjoining site. The Darkinjung Local Aboriginal Land Council, who is recognised for this area, have been offered several opportunities to comment but have chosen not to. Had they believed that there was a risk to culturally important sites, they would have been provided a comments as such. An AIM search has confirmed that there are no Aboriginal sites identified on the subject land or adjoining sites on the eastern side of Wards Hill Road. The subject land is categorised as containing major disturbance due to excavation for the construction of a large water tank, ancillary buildings, access, and the assumed subsurface aspects such as pipes and water distribution. yet there is no record or insinuation of any heritage items being discovered during these works. Like many of the other speakers today, I wish to highlight that the external referrals to CASA, New South Wales, RFS and Ausgrid have either supported the proposal or had no objection to it. And with the exception of the ecologists who have claimed they didn't have enough information, all council internal referrals have come back in support. The final recommendation for refusal has suggested that the proposal is not in the community's interest. It is hard to understand how this could be substantiated when 2/3 of the submissions received during the notification of the proposal were in support of it. The site is also required as part of a federal government mobile black spot program. This is a government-funded initiative to improve coverage and connectivity to areas which greatly need it. The local community have overwhelmingly been behind this proposal and are desperately seeking more connectivity, especially in emergency situations. I thank you for your time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the panel may have.
Thank you, Mr. Leverington. Any panel member want to ask Mr. Leverington a question? No, Jerome? David? No? You're on mute, David. I'm assuming you're saying no. I'll take it as a no, Greg.
Just whether Jordan can explain a bit more detail why multiple repeater units, repeater facilities, or smaller towers couldn't achieve the same coverage as this monopole.
I'm not a technical expert, but I'll try my best. For example, each carrier would require to have their own antennas. So that would be a group of 3. So TPG, Telstra and Optus being on these poles. Structurally, I'm not sure that they could support that many. Therefore, they would need to be separated, which would have more of a visual impact. They would also need to be more of them to overcome topography, trees, buildings and the such. I'm not even sure if they're in the right location, but I know that our technical experts have considered this because they thought that could be an option, but it's been categorically excluded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more questions from the panel? Well, that brings the open part of this meeting to a close. What will now happen, as I outlined at the beginning, the panel will adjourn to consider all that we've now heard this afternoon and all that's been submitted. If we were meeting in person, we might then reconvene to hand down our decision, but given this is an electronic meeting, we'll instead seek to have the panel's decision up on the council's website as soon as possible. We may decide the whole matter, and if more information is required by the panel, the decision may be deferred, which is an option that appeals to the applicant in this case. So I now formally close this part of the meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd like to thank all those who've attended and participated. Your input has been very useful to us and we'll give it very serious consideration. Thank you also to the council staff. I now declare this part of the meeting closed. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.